So yeah, since we've gone to Zoom, we've tried to record these and put these up on our YouTube channel for later viewing. So, but anyway, with that, again, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the June 9th KC Downtowners virtual luncheon. My name is Stan Myers. I'm the president of KC Downtowners. I also serve as client development manager for Terracon. We're an engineering firm headquartered here in Kansas City. And for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, welcome. And just to share that the KC Downtowners, we're a 20-year-old organization and an informal association of Kansas Cityans who live, work, and or play in downtown Kansas City. And our overarching goal is our dedication to downtown development and to promoting a positive community spirit. And I think the program that we have featured today really fits that mission very well. Before we get into that, we have some other things I'd like to cover, and I want to start today with a special thank you to our past president, Kim Guile, who is actually helping out today, helping this old baby boomer maneuver through this Zoom meeting. We made the transition last month, and I promised a peaceful transition, but not necessarily a smooth transition. And so I'm sure that that will probably play out. But I just wanted to make special mention that, you know, last year was a crazy year, and we could not have been blessed with a better person to lead our organization than Kim. I mean, we quickly pivoted March and April. I think it was April when we did our first virtual meeting, and then Kim took over formally in May. And you know, the joke was that Vince got to see in a Super Bowl parade, and Kim got to see a pandemic. But honestly, we just can't thank her enough for her leadership, for guiding the ship through some very interesting, choppy waters. It wasn't just COVID. You know, we had a lot of social unrest, and every time something happened, it just seemed to, you know, just get us all down. Kim always came up with just the right message for this organization to share. And in that spirit, as we considered what we wanted to do for her, we came up with something collectively. And Kim, I'm just going to ask you to share that video now, because we had an in-person board meeting last week, and you thought maybe something was going to happen at this meeting, but we preempted that. So why don't you go ahead and roll that.
I did exactly what I didn't want to do, and that is I forgot to share my audio. Hang on, let me do that.
Where are we going?
Excuse me, is there an outgoing KC Downtowners board president at the table?
I don't know. It's a private meeting.
Oh, thank you. I did nothing. Your colleagues did everything. And thank you for all of you.
Oh, look at this.
I love this. This is the one that's right. And it is signed by all of the artists.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. Oh my goodness, great job.
Okay, hi, sorry.
So yeah, that was wonderful. I didn't tell. I guess I should have said before. Maybe you all recognize that was Pierpont's. You'll recall when we met in person, we always had them cater. So we want to support them by having our 2 most recent board meetings there. But you know, Chrissy Dastrup, our former board member, was very active last September as the community came together, and there was that wonderful weekend where street murals were painted in support of Black Lives Matter, and that was, to me, just seemed the most fitting thing to recognize your efforts. You've got the frame photo back behind you there. Kim, would you like to say anything before we?
Well, I really couldn't think of a more special and meaningful way to be honored than this amazing piece that's signed by all the artists. And the library has their own right outside the library there on 10th and Main. So it's just really amazing. And thank you, Stan. And I am very confident that you are going to be a spectacular president.
I would like to be one in 3 dimensions. I know that. So and hope we'll get there soon. We'll get there. And Kim, thank you again. So we appreciate everything you did. So the other item of business I want to mention before we move into the program and sponsors and everything. We had 4 openings on our board. I think we had mentioned that in the months leading up in the spring that we would be interviewing. We had 10 wonderful people apply. And so we went through that process and talked to 10 magnificent people, and we have gone through the process and selected 4 new board members. So if this were an in-person luncheon, we would introduce you, have you stand, embarrass you, all that good stuff. But for now, I just want to mention you all by name. Karen Clark, who is with Ross and Barazini. I know she, for several years, has been a supporter and attendee of KC Downtowners. Sydney Goldberg with Goldberg Group Architects. Renee Holtgren with Port KC, and Kate Marshall with Show Me KC. So I want to congratulate all of you. Thank you for your interest in the board and joining us. Look forward to when we get together in person, and hopefully not in the too distant future, we'll luncheon or social, and everybody can meet you all. So thank you all and congratulations. Now I would like to recognize our sponsor for the month, which is J.E. Dunn Construction. And Kim, can you see Miss Gigi? Is she on the call?
I do not see her on the call right now.
Okay, so I'm going to tap dance a little bit. Miss Gigi is on our board, and she is community development manager. I'm probably saying that wrong. For J.E. Dunn, she's very focused and involved with engagement, and we've just been so happy to have her on the board this last month. But we're also, so happy that the organization that she works for, J.E. Dunn, is such a powerful member of our community, such a great steward. The project that we're going to hear about today, is right next to their global headquarters. So J.E. Dunn is committed to downtown, and we want to thank J.E. Dunn for their sponsorship today. We also highlight a nonprofit every month because, since we've gone to a virtual format, and we're getting together, we don't have lunch, so we ask people to in lieu of the normal registration fee, consider donating that money to a charity. And we asked J.E. Dunn, which one they might like to highlight, because they championed several. And they thought that Restart would be a great organization to promote. They're located downtown. They work to help the homeless population. The project that we're going to hear about today kind of exemplifies a lot of the initiatives that the Urban Land Institute has been promoting, such as equitable development, affordable housing, mixed use, mixed income, projects that are accessible to all. with the folks on inclusivity. So it's just so appropriate that Jay Dunn suggested that we promote Restart. And if you go to their website, and Kim, if I maybe even ask you to go to restartinc.org, and I think the first thing that will show up is a box to make a donation, and we could maybe put that in the chat. So that would be great. Thank you, Jay Dunn. Please consider supporting Restart. And with that, we'll get into the program here. I think most people on Joe Perry. Joe is Vice President of Development for Port KC, but he's also the Chair for Mission Advancement for the Kansas City District Council of the Urban Land Institute, and served as a juror on the most recent 2021 Hines Student Competition. Joe, he's been involved in urban planning and development in Kansas City for, I won't say how many years, but he's just, Kansas City is so lucky to have him. And Joe, I'm going to turn this over to you because I know I've heard you talk about this before. You're passionate, you're outstanding, and these folks are looking forward to hearing you. So Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about Team Fusion and the 2021 Hines Student Competition.
Well, thank you so much, Stan. I'm hopefully sharing my screen by now. I'm want to just show you some slides that were prepared by the winning team this year. And I really wanted to give briefly just a self-introduction about the District Council of the Urban Land Institute and what the Hines competition is. Just briefly, my background in real estate, land development, and also in urban design and planning. So I see some former colleagues when I was in various positions over time that are on this call. But I think the unique part of one of the things I'm putting my time in, which is the Urban Land Institute, and this competition, is that it's multidisciplinary. The Hines competition was started in 2003, and it was endowed by Gerald Hines and the Hines companies. And in fact, Gerald Hines came to Kansas City just a few years ago to accept the ULI Prize for Visionaries in Urban Development. And that was significant for me. I got to be in the room and hear his talk to receive that award, actually in the Block building at our fine Nelson Atkins Museum. And in that talk, he talked about how important the Hines competition is to his legacy. He died last year. We lost him to after a big career. And I think many of you know that award that he received just a few years ago was endowed by the Nichols family here in Kansas City. And so that is still the home of that prize. And so I think it was very significant for ULI and kind of the stature of many people who have given a lot of time to make our district council notable in flyover country here in the middle of this in the United States, that a lot of recognition. And in fact, I wanted to recognize my former colleague, the former president of Port KC, Michael Collins, who just this week was announced will be on the global board of the Urban Land Institute, which is the highest ranking group of people that run that organization. And I'm delighted to be able to say that Michael will have that position and we'll have more opportunities. This is the first time the Hines competition has been in the city of Kansas City for a site. And because this is a really sought after prize to win, the students actually win a $50,000 prize on this. And I think what's more important to Kansas City going forward, and I'm going to mention it here at the beginning because I don't want to lose this point, is that future winners, like the winners this year from the city of Toronto, often come from cities that hosted the competition in the past. So because Kansas City and Missouri and Kansas institutions of higher learning have never won this this competition, I wanted to bring it up because a lot of people on this call would be very good professional advisors for future teams. And I've done that 3 or 4 times. And if anyone has an inclination to want to volunteer in that capacity next year, I would just encourage you to talk to Lauren Kano, who is looking for professionals to act in that capacity for more than just one team that'll come out of Kansas City or Missouri and Kansas institutions. So let me get into the, of course, I'm trying to figure out how to make my slides advance now that here we go. All right. So this year, the Hines competition had the largest number of entries in its history. There were 110 teams registered, but I think what's significant in a virtual world, 105 of those actually completed a project in less than 2 weeks and submitted those 105 teams. It was in the East Village. I'm going to go over some of the context here in a minute. Only 6 of those, as I'm going to go over in a minute, have included a stadium in the East Village, and some of you might be surprised by that. You can see that there were international teams and that many universities entered more than one submission. Like I said, only 6 stadiums out of 110 entries, but 2 of those made the finals. There were 4 finalists, and half of them included those 2 of those 6 stadium projects. A lot of hot air balloons. They must have thought Kansas City was full of hot air balloons because they were all over people's graphics. And as you can see on your screen, there was at least, because it was very timely of the moment, there was at least one Bernie Minton's inclusion in graphic boards. But I'll just skip to the punchline of favorite team names of the jury. The last one was my personal favorite, Work From Homies. I thought that was pretty darn clever in 2021. We had a lot of these teams who never met in person the people they did these projects with. Now, get your head around that for a minute. You've never met in person and you had to collaborate on a multidisciplinary project. Many of you have done that in the last year for professional work. These graduate students did it for, I think you'll be impressed once you see what some of the outcomes were. I want to just talk about the jury for just a minute, because every time there is a national competition for the Hines competition, about a third of them, and this year there were 16 jurors, about a third of those will be from the host city. Randy Breedar from J.E. Dunn was included, Amy Slapp from Automo Architects, and Lynn Carlton. Jill McCarthy and myself were the other of the 5 local people that were on the jury. We were humbled. It was an esteemed national group. Also, I just wanted to mention there were a lot of opportunities for other local people to get involved in both the rehearsal juries or preparing the actual request for proposal that the students respond to. So I just wanted to give a shout out to especially these 4 individuals who also, I think all 4 worked on the rehearsal jury. The rehearsal jury in this competition and the actual jury's remarks are really important in this competition, because part of this competition is responding to the feedback. And one of the really unique things about this design competition is it's not just architectural design. It's not just financial feasibility or environmental consciousness or replying adequately to the host city's design criteria. It's all of those things. And you have to communicate well within a team. So again, the 2021 gave a particular challenge to these students, especially the ones like some of the finalist teams who came from multiple universities in multiple cities and had never met one another. The highlighted blocks, the 8 core blocks that you're seeing here on your screen from 8th Street down to 12th and from Cherry to Charlotte in the East Village were the core blocks. And 1 block outside of those 8 in all directions was also fair game. So in the actual request for proposal, they were told if they wanted to include any parcel outside of that, they could in the first 10 years on their pro forma. But if they went beyond that one block periphery around these 8, those must be not in their core 10-year returns. They must be just considered a future phase. But if that was important to them, they could do that. We had some really heartbreakers that were phenomenal projects that got disqualified because they broke that rule. And that's one of the things about this competition that's not like others. We really asked the national staff of the Urban Land Institute if we could break that rule this year and let some of these extraordinary projects get through, because they significantly spoke to the part of the charge, which was to look at East, West, and diversity and equity and inclusion in their responses. And they went really far east to do that. But they unfortunately did it in their first 10 years of their pro forma. And we were told we could not let those go through to the finals. One of the things that I would, before we get into the meat of the winning submission fusion project, kind of one of the stars of the show of newer things in the environs of the 8 core blocks was Ride KC's new transit stop. And so many of you have seen this and gotten a chance to see the significance of moving the location from right across the street from the library over to this new site that makes way for the Prospect Max and other interactions and the extension of this, or expansion of the streetcar. The challenge brief included some really key topics, and I want to really briefly go over just a couple. That they should address thriving mixed use, mixed income neighborhoods, have a catalytic vision, provide for positive economic impact, both surrounding neighborhoods and inside of the city. And I said before, equity and affordable housing, not just on the site, but how would their proposal address citywide issues in those 2 concerns? And significantly, the really big ones that attracted a lot of attention hit this last point, which was the future of transportation to your site, and especially a keen look at the parking considerations. I think you're going to see that the winning proposal really hit that hard, and maybe one of the reasons that they rose to the top. But I think that last one is interesting because, as you saw on the previous side, the site is almost all parking today. So, you know, that kind of was the biggest challenge. And people that had been on the jury before and the staff nationally out of DC for the Urban Land Institute would tell you that this is possibly the hardest site ever given to students, because they were asked to do a catalytic project in an area with very little momentum and catalytic development today. I'm not going to go through everything about you can read some of those, scan through what I'm showing in the next 2 slides, but just again, this is multidisciplinary, and that's really what this slide is telling you about. They needed to be scored on working as a team, and really being good about their pro forma and having their graphics describe their vision. We had some really great projects in all those regards, but they really didn't work together. We had one that we gave some really critical feedback to that I'll show you later that did respond to the critical feedback, and they got a lot better. And I'm going to note some of those things because it's, again, kind of a unique part to how this particular competition works. On this slide, the only reason I'm showing you the timeline is because they produced what you're about ready to see in 2 weeks. And when you see what they did in 2 weeks, and especially, they did this remotely, and that then the 4 finalists got 2 more weeks to respond to the criticism and the rehearsal jury, I think you're going to be pretty impressed at what a group of graduate students could produce. And I bring up the graduate student part of that because some of these are not 22-year-olds. Some of these are 28 to 32-year-olds that have a lot of experience. And some of the other people that you'll see in some of these slides are people that nationally, they're advisors, you've heard of them, you've seen their names. And so I think it's notable that there is some extremely great talent that comes to the Hines competition every year. And again, out of the $50,000 prize, the rules state that the host schools can only keep $5,000 of that winning prize. So each one of these 5 participants on the winning team walked away with either $9,000 or $10,000, depending on their school's rules on if they retain the $5,000 or not. All the finalists likewise got $900 per participant. So with that pretty long intro, I'm gonna go through a couple of things and on the winning team. And these are the 5 winners. These these men and women walked away with $9,000 or $10,000 per person. The Canadians took the prize this year, folks. All of these 3 universities represented are in Toronto. Ryerson University of Toronto and York University were represented on this team. I show you this slide because later I'm going to show you an improved version of this slide. You can see that if you're in architecture, I saw a pretty good list of architects on the call today. This was not the best work we saw, but this was the internal pedestrian street in the plan that you're going to see more about as we go through. And I also use this slide to kind of open up their vision because this gives you a rundown. And I'll note that internal rate of return and levered rate of return and their equity multiple, those changed when they adapted. And you'll see that this $655 million project, because of criticism they got from the panel, they thought that they overshot the absorption for the kind of uses they were promoting. They came back with something under $500,000. They got a lot of points for paying attention to the criticism and responding to that. This is the site plan for the project. And in a nutshell, down here in this lower block on the south, that's right next to the transit center. And they put their first phase and their highest density and most of their retail in proximity to that. That was really key. It was one of the best phasing plans that we saw. In the middle 2 blocks, or in the next 4 blocks, but specifically the 3rd block from the north, that is their iconic community center. And they particularly and cleverly sort of made a stadium out of the inside of that community center. Even though their plan did not include a baseball stadium, they included a stadium-like element, and they made a big deal at both the preliminary round and the final round of talking about how that fulfilled some of the purposes that they didn't say a baseball stadium, but they said a stadium. So I thought that was clever, and they were the only team that directly hit head on the lack of a stadium in their plan of those that didn't include a stadium. And then as we go through, I'm giving you just kind of a flavor, but this graphic maybe, which was one of their early graphics in the preliminary round, this really talked about their 2 pillars of how they addressed the charge. And that was connectivity and resiliency. Not unlike a lot of other teams, they hit head on some of the key words that were in the RFP from the city. But what they did graphically and actually in the granular detail of how they did that and strategic partnerships, I think were very impressive. And you can see some of the word clouds that go along with the concepts. I also show you this in their first round, which got a lot better in the second round because it included the rain garden. And more than any other team, and a lot of them hit on the big fall of elevation from north to south on this site. But they started at the south end because of the transit center, but as much as that, because it was the lowest piece of ground, and they wanted to make their stormwater system work going from south to north. So because of that, they started in the lowest place, and they were the only team that I remember that keyed in on that. A lot of other people had a phasing plan in disregard to that element. And if anyone's done recycled rainwater and other things, it's really hard to start at the top of the hill when you're building on that concept. And they really showed their integration of site and civil to architecture and financial feasibility, because that was probably one of the reasons they won, because they did all three of those at almost every turn. So I wanted to kind of start with one of those concepts. I really liked this graphic that they refined for their final, this axonometric view, because you'll see the promenade that goes north to south all the way through the site. And then in this area, you see these retail buildings that are double loaded. I have to just tell you that most of the jurors that actually work in real estate development said that's never going to work. But because they had a rationale and they anticipated that criticism and they had reasoning and they never faltered and said, you're right. A lot of times you would get that from these students when pushed by a juror on a specific question. They stuck to their guns right up to the finals, and they defended that. That was just one piece where they rose to the top because of their ability to sell their concept and to say why the community input told them this is the way it needed to be. So I wanted to bring that up. And also I thought this graphic showed their inclusion of community gardens, which goes to the urban agriculture component of what they did as a project. And you see them both at the rooftop and at ground level, but I thought that was important. I'm not going to go through each one of these vignettes, but this goes to some of the detail I've been talking about of how the actual stormwater system worked. How does sustainability and green infrastructure lead to profitability and better human experiences? Again, another graphic, Amy Slattery, one of my other local jurors, Amy she and I both gushed over the first round of graphics. But even if this wasn't a beautiful graphic, this is one of the first slides they ever showed us. And on the left, they took things out of the charge, out of the RFP, and said, these are the things you said you wanted us to do. And they drew a line between that and all of the components that they're proposing to accomplish with this project in the middle, and showed you how they fused. So therefore, the name of their project, Fusion, how they fused all those things together to come out and address the outcomes on the right in the word clouds. And they did this this is a very complex set of dynamics, but again, it went to that they took these multiple disciplines that are color-coded here and these multiple requested outcomes and showed how each element led to the overarching outcomes on the right. It was very effective and it's intuitive. If you read through this, you can say, yeah, I see how those things go together to accomplish these multiple disciplinary goals all at once. I'm not going to go through a lot of the citywide things, but the reason I showed you this connectivity tissue is they did one of the best jobs, as I stated before, of linking east to west movements and not just north to south. So many students just only dealt with something like they did with a north-south pedestrian spine, but didn't really talk about how you were going to connect our downtown area to Paseo West and to Union Hill. And they did that. And because we gave them a lot of criticism of they didn't really integrate the future transit changes that were anticipated here, they came back with these vignettes on the right and showed us how they were going to enhance that slide I started with at the, not started with, but at the beginning on the new transit center, and really integrate that more into and make hay on that. So again, another reason why this one was the winner was because they responded to the criticism given. This is that kind of look inside of the community center on the right here. This vignette shows their community center kind of, if you will, a section through the two iconic parts of their building. And this really shows how the outdoor areas and the internal areas terrace down into a stadium-like interior courtyard. This was their section from the right of this in the middle is from the north down to the south. And again, it goes right through that iconic building. This is color coded by uses. I'm not going to go through those now, but I'm going to just highlight a few things out of that in the next couple of slides that go to how they accomplished those things that the city's criteria for the projects came into fruition. So let's go to something more exciting, like views of the internal part of how the stormwater works. One of the things that they did was made a lot to do with the city of Fountains, and that there would be areas. This is one of 3 or 4 water features in the development that not just have an element for enjoyment and a place for community to come and enjoy an urban space, but they're also doing demonstration with their recycled rainwater. And each one of these urban elements, without trying to go into the detail, it's told a story about what they're accomplishing and how it works to benefit the greater community. And again, that was a real winner with the jury. The one thing about this, and I thought that this goes to that east-west view of how they articulated each one of these streets. If you look at how they pochade with trees and streetscape, and you see the difference in character, that's because each one of these streets is intentionally a different character. The one down the gut that doesn't have a lot of trees is specifically about that transit corridor. It's about moving people in and out as efficiently to the highest density areas. The next one up is about bike ped and getting people into those corridors. And then the top one is to get the cars out of the way of the other two. And interestingly, we thought, the local jurors thought, that they hit just dead on the future plans of the transportation plans of the greater downtown area plan and other documents like that. And they referenced those. So one of the few projects that really got that granular and referenced why they did things, not just because they imposed their godly will, but because they thought that that's what they had been told to do in the reference materials that were available to every team. And then that, I'm just going to go back quick because I forgot that I also wanted to say is this is one of the teams that really maintained the city block grid. A lot of the other teams broke the grid, and some of, by the way, some of the jurors just loved it, and some of the jurors were just grid components and wanted to keep it. So that was not a component that necessarily scored for them, but I just wanted to mention that was, they kept the block grid, but as you see, they kept the block grid by making one of those north-south, which is homes, a pedestrian way. So, sorry, I had to go back and get that. Then this was one of the things that they did best. Almost any finalist did this well, which is to say how they were going to program their community in phases and over seasonal changes. There were 1 or 2 projects that were really, really good that didn't do that didn't recognize that Kansas City has 4 seasons. But almost all of them did, and this one did it extremely well. So if you go through there, what I thought was clever about this is they went back to their 2 pillars, and you can see that they color coded the vignettes and they color coded the seasonal uses by their two pillars, which are connectivity and resiliency. And no other team tied the changes of uses back to their core concept. And the fact that they did it and they color coded it in the vignettes as well as down here was something that was legible, that you could understand it. And we thought it was just highly sophisticated for even a graduate student project. The building blocks graphic also demonstrates some things I just wanted to spend a second on. The yellow on this kind of exploded view is everything above the ground floors. So you can see that on the ground floors, you can kind of see the feel of where the retail is in pink and the residential, or excuse me, the research, office, and innovation in blue. The for rent residential in yellow and the for sale residential in orange. What is difficult in this graphic, and probably the only graphical thing that I really take exception to, is these greenish gray are their ag innovation and for urban agriculture. And the gray, which is hard to discern, are the parking garages. But one thing I wanted to say about this graphic is one of their key things was, even though it was transit heavy and they're borrowing off of the existing parking in the greater downtown and they're not adding a lot of parking, they did distribute their new parking decks in lots of smaller parking decks where most groups put in one or two really big ones. And they wanted to make sure there was a 5-minute walk for transit and a 5-minute walk for bike ped and a 5-minute walk for those arriving by car and parking. So also on this graphic, while we're on the housing, the yellow and the orange, they overshot the goal of 20% of affordable. And they overshot it not only in numbers and percentage, but they also overshot the goal that was presented to them by the amount of the lower household incomes. So they had 30% of their units at 50% average household income for Kansas City, which is a really high bar. And on their pro forma, which was pretty darn good, we thought that they actually made a financial case for getting there. It wasn't just made up and required funding money that wouldn't be available. Again, this is one of their final graphics. This got, again, very granular and I would say went farther than most on specific organizations, both big and small, that they would see as their partners for this. And they, again, if you go from left to right, the kind of the blue and the orange go to one of their pillars, and the green and the salmon go to their other pillar. So they tied everything again back to their 4 overarching things they were asked to do and to their 2 pillars, which were connectivity and resiliency. Finally, the financial part. And this is the part that most of the teams that did well but didn't do well on one part or another, this is the one most people fall down on. They have really great ideas for urban design and architecture and transportation, but so many of them fall down on the financial feasibility, and not this team. And what you're going to see, like I mentioned before, is the project got smaller, the IRR got a little tighter on the front end, but we thought it was still a logical plan. And it got a little worse for the investor, but it was still one of the more reasonable IRRs we thought we saw across asset classes. They give us a really big pro forma that we go through, and I happen to be the finance person on one of my sub jury teams of 5 people. And when we go through those pro formas, we actually look at returns per asset class and the time and the likelihood and the absorption by apps. And if we think they've missed it in person, we call them on it and ask them to explain for it. And That doesn't mean they won't get through to the finals, but it does mean that if they don't respond to that, they won't be the winner. And this team already had a reasonable, in all of those financial regards, but they actually responded to some negative criticism and fixed some things. So we're about ready to to wrap up on the winner. I didn't go into a lot of detail. I'm going to let the project speak for itself at the very end. For 2 minutes, I'd like to just show you how they recapped it, but really, really quickly, I just wanted to show you that kind of awkward graphic I started with that they got a little bit of feedback on, critical feedback. This is what they came back with for that pedestrian street. We said, hey, your architecture is a little wonky, you know, and not that everybody on the jury loved this, but it sure felt like a more human place. They put people in and there was better scale. It looked like some places you would want to be in multiple seasons. And this is just one view of that they showed us. But I wanted to show you that, you know, we felt like they took our criticism and responded to it. So let me go really quick to the finalists that didn't get picked. Georgia Tech is one of those cities who had formerly, one of the teams that I had advised made a submission on a site very near Georgia Tech. In fact, I mentioned before, some of these advisors, if you read the New York Times architectural section or listen to NPR, you've probably heard of Ellen Dunham Jones. I mean, she wrote the book Retrofitting Suburbia and many other kind of scholarly writing. So some of these teams have quite a leg up by who their advisors are, but this Georgia Tech team did a really great project that was very similar in what they wanted to bring existing core strong Kansas City businesses like Animal Health Corridor and animal and veterinary technologies, but they also hit on Kansas City's weaknesses that we don't have a research higher institution of higher education. And they said, you got to have one and we're going to build you one. And they said exactly how and with what groups from existing regional universities would they put on this campus. They got some pushback from the local jurors, but we thought it was bold and it was one of the better projects we saw. And here's a graphic that kind of shows, you can see K-State, MU, KU represented in this. They talked about things that actual companies in Kansas City were doing and things that could be researched if we had that here on this site. It was a fantastic project. I just wanted to show you that briefly. The next one I'm going to show you is one of the two stadiums. This one happened to come from all Cal Berkeley students. You can see that, not surprisingly, they had a principal at Populous from the San Francisco office as a part of their team. And I'm going to just give you a brief overview. There was some things that we just loved about this project. You can see that they went over here to Margaret Kemp Park and really tied in some, and they addressed that the 18th and Vine youth baseball facilities existed. And they see this as an addition to that, not a takeaway from that. They had specific programming things and they didn't get disqualified this because they did it past year 10. So a lot of other groups looked at that piece of ground and did things, but they got disqualified for it. This one had a piece that went over the highway that was significant. But here's what I'm going to tell. Chris Migneron was on the phone when we started, or on this call when we started, but Chris would tell you this is an awfully big footprint, I think. All they did for the baseball stadium was take the actual footprint of Kaufman and drop it on this site. And that did not fly with people that had worked on sports architecture projects because it's just too big a footprint and everybody knew it. And maybe there's dispute in the industry whether that was inappropriate or not, but it did make it to the finals. We gave them that feedback. They didn't fix it. It was kind of one of those things where they had a really great project for many reasons, but the biggest criticism we gave them was their stadium footprint to make it more urban, and they didn't do anything about it. But it was an exciting project. We thought it merited being a finalist. Does anybody see significant local tie-ins of this graphic, especially the name? Put it in the chat if you see the significance and can identify what Stadium 42 and how it went to what I said was one of the charges of that. And I'll look for Stan to tell me who gets the right answer first. I thought that would be more fun than me telling you what it is, because many of you probably got it right away what Stadium 42 is in reference to. The last chart team I wanted to bring up before I showed you how they ended the winning presentation was a team called Eviro. This was one of those teams that came from multiple cities, from multiple universities. These students are from the University of Houston, Columbia University, and Penn State. This was one of those teams where some of these people had gone to undergraduate school together, and some of the students had never, I think one of them had never met the other students. And again, that was pretty impressive because that one student was one of the disciplines that they really leaned on, and you could tell that there was great coordination. The plaza that they used, they took the cant that exists on Holmes Street and they drove it right down to the stadium front. Their architecture was not really well refined, but one of the things they did do was, like the other one, they really came and showed how their four concepts were related to the elements. And we really bought into this big plaza in front for game day. Otherwise, you know, this was probably the all-around best of the six that included a stadium, because they went to financial feasibility. Most of the other stadium projects just didn't make sense financially. But the thing that really drove this one to the finals was their mobility plan. They added almost zero parking for that stadium, and they showed how using the existing transit plans and just executing what we said we already wanted to do, and really tying into that this E-loop, they call it, should go over to the Paseo, or not to the, into Paseo West, and hit the stops on the Paseo and the Troost Max, and also the existing north-south lines. They went into the granular detail, and I won't go into all the details, but it was just one of the most impressive things that we saw on how to address the issues of downtown mobility, east to west traffic, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the development. They really did a beautiful job of all those things. And they used, and the other thing I'll show you here is, this is how that pink area on this vignette, how that works on game day. And you can see that big plaza opening up at the front door of the stadium. It was just a beautiful plan. We all enjoyed it a lot. And they had some fatal flaws I won't go into that made them not the winner, but that just is. So if I can, I'm going to try to share something different so we have even a minute left here. And let's see if I can get to that. All right, sorry, it's taken a minute for me to switch screens here. It says it's starting to share, and hopefully you're going to be able to hear, because I've been told that I need to make sure that I'm sharing my audio. So I'm doing that really quick. Everyone should jump up and down, and especially Stan and Sydney, who I can see if you don't get audio.
Right now, in a global pandemic, we've really been pushed to recognize the importance of space, our private space at home, and the value of our shared open public spaces. It's brought to light the importance of livability and access to critical amenities in the outdoors. Our site aims to take these learnings and create a truly holistic and connected community, where the residential units are comfortable, green space is plentiful, and transit and key amenities are just around the corner. But what's most important about Fusion is its focus on community. It's a development built for locals alongside locals. It looks to take the best parts of Kansas City, the character, the culture, the existing skill sets and networks, and build upon them. A cook from Paseo West now finally has that protected bike lane she needs to feel safe to get to the kitchen incubator, where she can now access resources to test out a new barbecue taco concept. She sells these tacos at the local food hall to a municipal government employee who stops in at the end of a workday for dinner before picking up his daughter who plays basketball at the community center. On his way over, he bumps into an old friend who lives in the complex, who was just on her way to a free outdoor concert at the amphitheater. She just secured an affordable unit within Fusion, which significantly cuts down her commute to her retail job downtown. Being able to access transit, groceries, a pharmacy, restaurants, and a gym within a 10-minute radius has significantly enhanced her quality of life within KC. There is a place for everyone in Fusion, and that's what makes it special. It seamlessly fuses together.
It was just about ready to go into the question and answer with the jury. I just wanted to give you a flavor of how they presented their project. It was a real pleasure for me to get to be on this jury. I've been a part of the projects locally several times, like I mentioned. I really look forward to maybe even just one or two of you catching the bug and wanting to volunteer. The kind of professionals it takes to come in and help a group of graduate students bring in a project, an award like this, is a real feather for these host cities and these host universities. And it really is something that's been a lot of fun for me. And I really appreciate the downtowners asking me to come in, and humbled to present a great piece of work. I gave you a different view of it than they would have, but many of you have already seen them do it through the 2 times that they presented locally. So thanks, Stan. If anyone has a brief question, I'm almost run you out of time.
If there have been a few questions that come in, if you have time, I know we're up against the hour, but if you got maybe just a couple minutes that you can run over. And
Yeah.
Nearly everyone got the Jackie Robinson reference correct. Because we're distracted by Paul Rudd and the Big Slip team. So that was really great awareness as well to include that local component. The questions, and maybe I can bundle them together, but a lot of it is kind of themed around, going from concept to reality. And, one question that came in from Doug Langer, who is a resident, I'm scrolling down here. So yeah, Doug is a resident of East Village and on the board of the HOA, Eat the Cherry HOA, has 2 questions. Knowing Van Trust, it has a lot of the properties and some kind of development rights. Were they involved at all in this project, or what has been their reaction to it? And then second, for me, like my building, 15 stories, density is key, residential is key. Is that something that the winning team or others estimated how many new residents might live in this area?
They did. I believe their number was 1,030, Doug, units, and 30% of those were affordable units. What was different about this proposal was that many of those units were for sale. They addressed the absorption very well. They knew the numbers of how many units were selling downtown and how many days on market they had been. They really knew what they were talking about to the housing component. And we felt like, unlike a lot of others that said they were going to add 4, 6, 10,000 units in this area, that this was a reasonable amount for this part of downtown's absorption of the greater pie, for both the for sale and for rent. And we told them they had too many, and they had a lot fewer than a lot of the others. To the Van Trust question, Rich Muller was on, and he didn't make any comments. And so they listened, they were a part of it. They were definitely a part of creating the challenge and creating what was asked for with city planning. But they did not comment on the outcomes. And it'd be interesting to have that question go right to Rich or someone else at Van Trust.
Very good. Emma Martin with Trans Systems asked, any of the previous host cities implemented the winning projects or concepts?
That's a great question, Emily. I happened to go to the Georgia Tech campus the year after Atlanta hosted the Hines competition. And I did notice that there was development on the site, and I went over and walked over to it because I was staying at the conference center at Georgia Tech. And one of the components that the students said shouldn't happen in the group we did was actually under construction. And it did appear that some of the kinds of concepts that we saw in the winters that year were being implemented. In Toronto, near the waterfront, there have been elements that some people would say are reminiscent of some of the student projects. I'm not sure about the specifics from any of the other recent cities, but I do think that local people in Urban Land Institute that have seen this have had their kind of ideas perk up, because it in some cases validates things that the industry says, and in other ways it kind of gives you a fresh idea and a fresh look from people that come from all over the world. I did want to mention to that regard that ULI Europe has their own competition, but it didn't preclude students from Europe from applying to this one. But that this one came from all the applications. You had students from Singapore make the finals. So there were students from all over the world participating, but mostly continental United States.
Well, very good, very good. Joe, thank you again. There is actually one more baseball-related question. I think I may know the answer to this one. But Kevin Worley wants to know, if a stadium were to be built in East Village, would it necessarily have to face northeast, where there are no skyline views?
I should let other people that actually build stadiums say so, but I will tell you that the 3 people that were on the jury that had backgrounds in sports architecture or building stadiums said yes. We didn't have any submission. We only had one submission where second base was due north. Everybody else was in the orientation of the 2 finalists that you saw today.
Very good, very good. And Marvin Robinson just placed a comment in the chat, and maybe you joined late, so you may have missed it, but you did talk about the mixed income component and affordable housing. And Marvin wants to make note that the need would be particularly acute among veterans, and then the notion of job placement, workforce, entrepreneurship training, all those types of things, which I think maybe were in some of the details of all the teams. So I think certainly you should maybe address that.
I would just say, Marvin, you should go out, and if you do a search on a submission called The Weave, it was gorgeous. It responded to almost everything you put in your comment and question. And I would tell you that it was a heartbreaker for the jury because they were disqualified for breaking the rules, and we loved it. I think it brought some jurors to tears. It was just that good in that regard. So many to wraparound services and to supportive housing. I'm on the board of Save Inc., and I would tell you that that's near and dear to my heart. And I think that we have to do more of that in any kind of affordable housing project in Kansas City. So many of the submissions that were really good on the housing side brought that in, but the Weave probably was the best one. And you could probably find it. If you can't, let me know and I'll get it to you. It was amazing.
Very good, very good. Well, Joe, thank you again. The team came up with a wonderful idea. I want to mention them by name before we go. But we had Francis Grout-Brown and Leorah Klein from Ryerson University. I hope I'm going bad at pronunciation here. Ruotian and Chenyi Zhou from the University of Toronto, and Yanlin Zhou from York University. So those were the 5 students that were came from 3 universities in the Toronto, Canada area. And Joe, thank you for sharing the process. It's exciting to think about what some conversations that this may spark moving forward. There's so much momentum going on in Kansas City anyway. And now to talk about downtown and the focus here, it's really very exciting. So with that, we are past one. We got people I know need to drop off for the meetings. Thank you again, Joe. Thank you, J.E. Dunn. Please support Restart. We'll be back next month. It'll be July 14th. So we got a little bit of time because we meet the second Wednesday of every month. And July 1 is a Thursday this year. So we get a little bit of a buffer. So, but we will be back. Watch your email, check our website for information on the July program. Thank you all and have a great day.